Hi, everybody. Welcome. We'll get started here in just a minute or so. Welcome, guys. Hey, I like seeing all these familiar names. Kanisa, Birani, Martha, Leonie. Oh, awesome. I love when people come back. Suzanne, welcome. Hey, hey. I'm good. How are you guys doing? Awesome. Suzanne, where are you joining from? I feel like I know where everybody else is right now, but not you. Buffalo, New York. Welcome. We're not too terribly far from each other. Let me minimize my screen here. Okay, there we go. I'm going to share my screen with you guys and we'll jump right into it, okay? I'm in way northeast Pennsylvania, so I'm like right 20 minutes from the upstate New York border. Yeah. All right, guys. I'm going to share my screen with you. We'll get started. This should be a fun one. Nothing too serious today. Okay, so we're going to talk about design mistakes to avoid, and this is going to include literal design, but also the business side of design, a little mix of both, okay? Things that I've been burned and learned from, and the things that other designers have experienced and would like to pass on. So that's me. Do be sure to check us out on social media. Instagram is where all the fun stuff happens, and also on the community. If you're not already a member, I have the link to that throughout this presentation, and we'll also link it in the chat box and be talking about some different features there. If you have any questions, be sure to add them to the Q&A box that's on the bottom of the Zoom tab, and I'll be sure to get to those at the end, okay? Alrighty, so first things first, I'm going to kind of be going all over. We're going to go into a project in a second, but number one is choosing the wall paint or your coverings, your wall coverings like wallpaper first. This will always limit your choices for everything else in the room. And ultimately, even though what's on your walls, even though your walls take up a good amount of space of your room, they're not a functional part of your room, right? Your furniture is far more functional, and you don't want that to be limited right off the bat. So there's a million different paint colors. What we recommend doing, start with either a big furniture piece like a sofa, or a much more fun option, I think, is to actually start with a rug. And this is something that I'm just going to go ahead that Rose Sprinkle, who has a course on the community called Interior Design Essentials, talks about, among a million other things, and recommends. I'm going to show you how we did this. So I started with this rug and then brought in to a room on foyer different furnishings that bring out this beautiful color palette that we've now been provided. And I do it in a way where if we're talking percentages, the highest percentage of color that's represented on the rug all the way down to the lowest percentage is also mimicked in the space. So when we look at this rug, it has a gray border. We see a lot of this kind of blue teal throughout. And then we have this kind of cream mixed in as a nice neutral backsplash to these really vibrant colors. We see it's actually like a purple, but like a dark purple, almost black, orange. And then the smallest accent color that we see is red. Okay, so I came up with this sofa, which is one way of bringing orange into a space without it being like, you know, tangerine, is through leather. So a nice leather sofa, and then this artwork, which actually brings in pretty much every color from this rug. and then some Pharaoh and Ball paint color options and a nice red accent. So let me pull up this project. Alrighty, so there's our rug, right? I went big with this Pharaoh and Ball teal and did top to bottom baseboard, molding walls and ceiling to bring that out. Just gonna double click here. I brought in the cream in our accent chairs and in our coffee table, which you can see on the sides here is entirely cream, even though there's that black accent on the top. I bring orange into the space in a lot of different ways. We talked about the leather sofa. The lighting has a lot of gold, and then we have this kind of orange toned rattan. My chandelier has gold. My curtains have different shades of gold throughout. And then of course the artwork. And I also bring in some of like cream or just like a nice neutral contrast in these candles, which contrast nicely against the teal blue, and then in kind of the light neutral colors of these vases on the mantle. The gray border to the rug is brought in through the curtains, which have this nice kind of gray mottled look, and the throw blanket right here. And then lastly, the red is brought through in a much smaller way with the actual florals here. And then as we rotate, I have a little writing desk, and this writing desk is actually red leather, a nice like deep red. Okay, so a fun way to start with a rug that has a really beautiful color palette and build a room around that. And it's just so much easier to start here than if I had started with these walls. If someone had like plopped me in this room with these walls and said, okay, design from here, I guarantee you I would not have come up with this color palette. I would have probably felt a little overwhelmed by the intensity of the color, and I would have kept everything very neutral rather than bringing in the different color palettes that you see here. So rugs are a really nice way to gain inspiration when you're not quite sure which direction to go with a color palette or how much fun you can have with a space in terms of color. If you're like me and you tend to be more like neutral in your design style, this is a way of taking a cue from that and using the same percentage and mimicking it in the space to make it kind of an easier process for you. Okay, but still being super creative. Alrighty, so that's our mistake to avoid number one. Again, Rose Sprinkle has a great course on interior design essentials where she talks about this and a whole lot more on the community, which is community.foyer.com. And if you do /learn, that'll take you directly to that learn page. Okay, and number two, putting your pricing online. Just never do it. Never, ever. There's a one exception, just kind of as a starting off point, but listing your pricing online commits you to that price. And that is a big no-no. I want to say, especially when you're starting out, but honestly, if I had 25 years under my belt, I still wouldn't put my pricing online, because as you grow, first of all, I don't think I've met a single designer who hasn't actually who's actually charged what they're worth when they first start out, right? It's a process. This is something that I talked about with Leslie Merrick of Leslie Merrick Art and Design. We did a live Instagram live on Monday, which you can check out the full video on our Instagram page. But she also has a class about deciding on your design services and your pricing on the community. So she was talking a little bit about that. And when she first started out, she was literally charging $35 an hour. And one thing that she mentions is it happens very quickly that you go from being afraid to charge what you're worth to then getting some experience under your belt and oftentimes feeling really burnt out, resentful that you charge so little when you put in so much work. And so that's the biggest reason you never, ever want to put your pricing online. You don't want somebody who saw your prices 3 months ago and now you've learned your lesson and you've increased your price to go, well, back over the summer, you were only charging $50 an hour, and now you're telling me you're charging 110. I want that old rate, right? So instead, protect yourself, give yourself room to grow. And also, once you kind of get your feet wet and you find a price that's comfortable, you're not going to stay there indefinitely, because as you gain more experience and your services change and you evolve, your pricing needs to be able to match up with that and continue to grow as well. So instead of pricing, language like contact us for pricing details, contact us for a quote. You don't have to necessarily be by quote only to still use that language. If you have design packages, list the packages and everything that you receive, but really don't put your pricing there. The one thing that you can do that Leslie recommends, if you find that you're getting a huge influx of maybe interest, but these are not ideal clients because maybe you know that your first package starts at $1,500 and the people who are contacting you have a budget and the total budget for the entire project is $1,500, right? They can't afford you, right? So if you find that you're getting a lot of people in who are like way below budget for the projects that you want to be doing, what you can do is say packages starting at $1,500. And then when people visit your website, they'll see that and immediately go, oh, okay, great. That works with my budget, or she's outside my price range, and move along. And then you're not wasting your time or theirs doing a discovery call only to find out immediately that they're not an ideal fit. Okay. This is also something to bring up if you don't have this verbiage when you do have a discovery call. So you're going to hear me refer to discovery calls versus consultations. Discovery call, I'm referring to like a 15, 20 minute free call, which I refer to as the like, do we want a second date call, which is where you're not sharing any design expertise. That comes in the paid consultation, right? That's where you really have value. This is merely getting an understanding and building a bit of rapport with a person of what they're looking for, where their budget lives, and all those kinds of things. So if they say, well, what do you charge for this or whatnot, you can say, well, our packages start at this cost. What's the budget that you're working with? And go from there. Okay. So number 3 is skimping on lighting. Lighting is hugely, hugely functional in a space, but it contributes so much to the feel and the ambiance of the room, right? We all know that. So in Rose Sprinkle's course, she talks about lighting, and she actually, even though a lot of times you'll see there's just 3 types of light, she actually talks about 4 types of light that you should bring into the space. And I'll show you how we did that in that living room space. So the first is general lighting. That's your overhead lighting. Typically, it's your main source of light coming into the space. So maybe like a chandelier. Could also include recessed lighting. The second is your accent lighting, or sometimes it's called secondary lighting. And this can come in the form of, say, like a floor lamp. A floor lamp can also serve as task lighting, which has a very specific purpose. So if this were over a little accent chair in the corner of a room, and that was a little reading nook, that could function as both accent or secondary lighting and as task lighting, which I show you here as a desk lamp, right? Very specific. We turn it on when we're working at our desk. And then lastly is ambient lighting. This is used less for its source of light, and more for the warmth that it brings into a space. It's oftentimes in the form of a wall sconce, and it can either highlight, say, artwork, or frame artwork, or some kind of focal point, whatever your focal point is in your room. Okay, so I'll show you quickly how I made sure to include all types of lighting in this space. Okay. Let me orbit around here. So we have our general lighting in the form of this chandelier here. We have our ambient lighting, which, like I said, is framing the focal point of the room, which is this artwork. We have our accent lighting in the form of this floor lamp, which could also be task lighting because it's over the little corner of the sofa for a reading space. And then we have something that's purely task lighting, which is over this writing desk in the form of this wall lamp. Okay. So a good way, like, it's nice to have a few systems in place when you're working on creating a space and you look at it and you go, okay, how many sources of lighting do I have and what's their actual function? If you find that you maybe have, you know, several forms of task lighting but no ambient lighting, maybe, you know, work out where you have at least one of each. And then if the size of the room or the function of the room requires that you add more task lighting after that point, great. But make sure that you can kind of check off those boxes to really have a lot of dimension in the space. Alrighty. The next one is not communicating sourcing lead times early. Another great conversation to have in your discovery call is sourcing lead times. So especially now, the pandemic has just been terrible for sourcing lead times. You guys are well aware of this. And that's not even talking customization. If we're talking customized, even custom upholstery on a sofa can take 15 to 17 weeks minimum. And if there's one thing that I've consistently experienced and also heard from other designers, it's that your clients do not have any idea how much work goes into design or how many hours design takes you, and B, they have no concept of how long things take to come in. And I've experienced this myself where I did not communicate it. I kind of made this assumption that, you know, they were the type of person who was always online looking at products. So I just made the assumption that they knew that things would take a while, and that was incorrect. And they got upset with me because products were going to take 2 to 3 months to come in, and they had a project deadline or timeline that was ideal for them. It was completely unrealistic. So in your discovery call, one of the very first things that you should be asking is, what's your timeline for this project? Say they want to do, you know, full furnishings and decor in a living space, and it's October, and they tell you, well, this is something again that happened to me. You know, we told the family that we're hosting for Thanksgiving. So end of November is our deadline, and it's beginning of October. Well, so sorry, but that's not a realistic timeline for anything that you can't go into the store and purchase, or understand that the things that are more readily available and will arrive at your door in 2 weeks are going to be of much lower quality. So having that conversation up front so that people understand that you are not a magician, and you cannot, you know, fabricate and materialize furnishings overnight for them. And then that will not only help you filter out people who are not ideal clients, but it protects you, because sometimes there is that tendency to put that responsibility on the designer as if we have some kind of special abilities to make those things happen. So communicate sourcing lead times early and often. And I would also say have that written into your contract, which is something that we're going to discuss in a few slides. Alrighty, next is pushing the sofa flush with the wall. So here is an example of, there's a lot of things kind of wrong with this space, right? This rug is way too small. But this is an example of a sofa that's been pushed flush up against, and then an example of one that's been brought out just a tad, and a console table that's been placed behind. Two things. There is the misperception that when we push things up against the wall, we're creating more space, more walking space, and therefore more visual space in a room. But what happens when you push something like a heavy piece of furniture like a sofa up against the wall, you're preventing any kind of airflow behind that piece. And that actually decreases visual space. And if you're in something like a living room, of course you need walking space, but typically those spaces are used for entertaining. So it's actually more functional to pull that sofa out and add something, not only create airflow. We can see here, let me go to the next slide. You can see here, that's the same sofa here, that these are nice and leggy, right? Nothing bulky. So there's lots of airflow going in. And this is a functional piece for any client. And you can see here is another example, right? For any client who has pets, dogs in particular, or young children, this is not just pretty. It doesn't just actually increase the visual space of the room by adding airflow behind heavier pieces of furniture, but it's also a great place when you're entertaining, or even if you're just home alone. I have a 2-year-old, and the one thing that she loves to do is grab people's cups of coffee off the coffee table. So when people come to my house and they sit down and they have a cup of coffee or a drink, you know, my dad's sitting there drinking a beer. She, you know, I'm always like, don't put anything on the coffee table. And they look at me so confused, like, isn't that what it's for? But having this console table is a really nice way of helping clients who have this situation, or maybe dogs who like to jump up, to give them a higher point to set their drinks. They're kind of sitting back. They can simply turn like this, set their drink down. It's out of the way of any little hands or any little critters reaching for it. And it adds visual space to your room. So a really nice thing to consider. If you feel that tendency to kind of push things up, pause for a second, unless you have an extremely small space, and think about pulling it out. You're not going to be losing that much physical space that it's going to benefit over the benefit of the aesthetic and the look at it and the feel that it creates. Okay. Next, I mentioned earlier the contract. So biggest mistake you can have, number one, is not having one with a sign off. So I don't call my contract a contract. I call it a welcome packet, but it functions in the exact same way. And things that you want to absolutely, at a minimum, include are your scope of work to protect yourself, set healthy boundaries, and also so that there are absolutely no questions about what you do for your client's sake, right? It's reassuring as a client to have something that very clearly lays out all of these things that we're going to go over here. But it's also, it holds you accountable, but it also holds the client accountable. And more often than not, I find that that's what we really need as designers. So your scope of work, if you don't do procurement, make sure you write that out. If the client's in charge of purchasing all of those pieces, make sure that's clearly defined. The project timeline. So week one, maybe you're doing a project and you estimate that it's going to take 6 months. You want to have at the very least 2 points on a timeline per month, where you can say, okay, 2 weeks into the project, this is what you can expect from me. And this is what I need from you. You'll also do this on a separate page for your payment schedule, okay? So detail what to expect each week, or at least bi-monthly. The cost and the payment schedule expectations, make sure you clearly outline that work will not continue past this point until payment is received. You want to have signatures on each one of these pages. Honestly, I used to just accept a signature at the end, but even now that just feels too risky, because then they could say, oh, well, I missed this page, or I don't remember you going over this page with me when we sat down together. I didn't know that work was going to stop, or this, that, or the other. You don't want to run into that situation. So if you can say, actually, I have your signature at the bottom of the page, so we did go over this. Always better to protect yourself. When and how clients can contact you, way better to have this written in a contract that you go over up front, because clients do not have boundaries when it comes to getting their personal space done. If you don't want a text message at 9 a.m., or if you don't want the expectation that you're going to respond to a text message at 9 a.m. on a Sunday, clearly lay that out. I can be reached by email or phone Monday through Friday from X hours to X. Weekends, if available, but please don't expect responses, or I'll be back in the office on Monday. You can totally take weekends off, whatever you're comfortable with, but make sure you set those boundaries very early and that the client understands that. And then lastly, a photography clause. If you're doing, any project, sometimes with e-design, getting photographs is difficult, but any other type of project, I've spoken with a number of designers who verbally communicated in the start of the project, hey, would you mind if when this is done, I had a photographer come in to take photos for my portfolio? And the clients were like, yeah, no problem, absolutely. And then the project comes to a close and the designer reaches out and they get totally ghosted by the client. And then they've done all this work and they have nothing to show for it in their portfolio. So I encourage you to have a photography clause that is signed off on. And this is yet another thing that you can bring up in your discovery call to figure out if this person is going to be a good fit for you, because you don't want to invest all of this time and work and then not have anything to show for it at the end. If right off the bat in your discovery call, you say, hey, typically I have a photographer come in and photograph the space when it's done. Is that something that you are willing to sign off on in the contract? If they go, oh, I'm not so sure, or absolutely not, that's a great time to go, you know what? Unfortunately, this is something that is a part of my contract. I completely understand that you're not comfortable. I'd be happy to make you a referral for another designer who doesn't have that in their contract. And then you've just saved yourself a lot of headache and distress over not being able to document what you've done. So on the Foyer community, we did a blog post on a few, maybe eight or nine different welcome packet templates. And I'm going to show you that now. You can simply click on these pictures. I keep clicking the escape key and it doesn't want to get me out of here. There we go. So that you don't have to create these contracts or these welcome packets from scratch. Head to the Foyer community. When you scroll down, you will find the actual post here. Here it is. And then you just click on the PDF to view this. And that's here. So we have welcome packets for all different design styles. So glam, down to earth. And when you click on this, it'll bring you straight to the link where you can purchase these. It's everywhere, and anywhere from like $10 to $70, but these have like, some of them have like 36 pages that you don't have to use all of them, but it takes care of all of like the graphic design, the project timeline, everything is very beautiful, specific to that particular style. And then you just go in, you edit it and enter all of the information specific to your business. This is a really nice way to make, have a much more professional presence when you're speaking to a client, but of course protects you, holds you and the client accountable. Okay, so check this out on the Foyer community. Alrighty. So next and last is not having a clearly defined niche and how that impacts your brand. So I'm going to first, yesterday we had this is our starter kit group. This is our second group. Actually, we have two going. Yesterday we had our first meeting of the second group, which is this little picture here. And I want to show you this little clip. Designer brought up a great topic about she wasn't sure how to market to get the clients that she wanted. And I said, well, who's your client? What does that person look like? And she said, I don't know. And I said, okay, well, don't worry about marketing yet. That's where we need to start. So just a quick clip to just kind of simplify, but without that foundation of knowing what does that client even look like, we can't move forward. And so that's like a pitfall that a lot of us fall into, is we jump right to the marketing, but we don't know who we're marketing to. And so it's hard to make it targeted when we don't have a target, right? Right.
Makes sense. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that's going to be, we're going to be laying the foundation, knowing, getting very, very clear on who we want to serve. And then we're going to move forward into that. So I think you'll get a lot of clarity here. I'm excited. All righty. To just kind of simplify, but without that. Okay. So the point of that was, it's easy to put the cart before the horse. And I'm guilty of this myself, going out there and having, an Instagram page and a portfolio that's just like all over the place, because I'm just trying to cast this very, very wide net and see what comes in. But what oftentimes comes in when you do that is a whole lot of people that you don't want to work with, who can't afford you, who are just, you should never have to work with a designer or whatever it may be, right? Not ideal clients. So what the starter kit group does is we go through this. This is going to take place over the next 8 weeks. All 6 courses of the starter kit online courses offered on the community. And this was such a great conversation. We got to really talk about all of the challenges that designers are facing. And honestly, this was one of the biggest ones, is that they didn't have a niche. They didn't know what that client looked like. So how are you going to market to somebody, right? How are you going to hit a target that does not exist? You can't. So you have to start with that foundation. Lay the foundation of understanding what is your niche, what is your specialty, who is your ideal client, what do they do for a living, where do they live, are they married or single, do they have children, do they have pets, what do they do in their spare time? I mean, like very detailed information. So when someone says, who are you marketing to, you can say, okay, here's who I'm marketing to. It makes that process so much easier. But if you can't market and have a distinct brand if you don't have that foundation first. So that's one of the things that this starter kit is meant to do. If you guys are interested, we try and keep the groups small so that everybody has a chance to speak, and we'll be sharing their work as we take these courses and complete all the assignments. But I'll start another one. I'll start a 3rd cohort of the starter kit program. So if you guys are interested, you can always shoot me an email. It's rachel@foyer.com, and we'll start another group. Okay. In the meantime, the 3 courses that will really help you narrow all of this down are, this isn't a course, this is the recording from the Level Up event with Aida Laura, where she gives an entire presentation just on how to define your niche, all the different aspects that should come into it, how to kind of even think about what your niche might be. If I ask you what's your niche and you say, oh, it's mid-century modern, that's not a niche. That is a design style. Fantastic. That's a part of your niche. But really, your niche is far more specific than that. And so that's where identifying your ideal client profile, which is like a very detailed worksheet that she gives you to fill out. This is an online course with Michelle Lynn on the community. So I recommend starting either here or here. You could interchange. What you'll find is that after you do both of these, you might have to go back in and tweak and change those, but definitely start here. And then once you have that, that's going to help lead you into the Introduction to Marketing and Sales by Wendy Hicken, which is a course on the community. And that's where we take this information and we apply it to our marketing strategy. Okay. Alrighty. So those are the big design and business mistakes that I have for you guys. We'll get into the Q&A now. Do be sure to follow us on the community or join the community. And let's get into your questions. Awesome. So there's a link in the chat box. Thanks, Brian. And let's see, Suzanne says, I start with a rug or a painting, but rug typically first. Pretty space. Thanks. Yeah, it's so fun. And I was going to say the same, like the artwork has such a lovely palette as well, that's always a really fun place to start, but it also just like de-stresses me a little when I have an established color palette to work off of. Another tip I got from Lucy Go, I don't know if you guys know her, she's an interior stylist. And she said, if you're ever lost on your color palette, take a note from nature. And she would literally go outside or find a beautiful photo online of nature. And she said, nature never gets it wrong. A beautiful photo of nature never gets that color palette wrong. So looking at like landscapes and bringing in all of those colors into your space, again, in the same proportions, is another way to create a really beautiful palette throughout a space without like starting by throwing paint on the wall and then just figuring it out as you go. Okay. Okay, Martha is saying, do you have the welcome packet tablet? Yes, yes. Okay, good. You know the answer. Yeah, head to the community. I believe they're actually all but one found on Etsy, but I just really narrowed it down and tried to find ones that were thorough, because there were a couple that were only like 6 pages, but it wasn't thorough enough. So these are very in depth. They have a really fun aesthetic and they're totally editable, and it's just so much easier than having to come up with all that on your own. Definitely check that out. Alrighty, let's go into the Q&A. How would you describe your own niche? Birney, you have the talent of asking me questions that I don't have an answer to. No, I would say, so this is a great question, Birney. And I would say that my niche has very recently evolved, because when I first got started, and anybody who follows me on Instagram can scroll back and see the renders that I were posting were like all over the place, because I felt like I had to show people I can do every design style in the book. I can do it all. And that was such a mistake, because it brought in people who were all over the map. But it also brought me experiences and clients that have allowed me to grow and learn and understand myself better as a designer and what I really want to do. So what I would say to you, Birney, is that my niche now is evolving into, I'm going to be moving to Philly. Beautiful, beautiful brownstones. Just the architecture is absolutely gorgeous. I grew up in a very old house with like gorgeous, original wood floors and crown molding, very traditionally styled. And a lot of that traditional style really lives in me. And those are the spaces that I'm drawn to. So what I want to do is serve those brownstone owners, probably, somewhere in my age range, and their 30s and 40s, and they're committed to that kind of city life. They want to restore that brownstone glory, and they want traditional elements in their space, but with a modern twist. That's really where I live. Growing up, like I said, everything was ultra traditional in my house, and that's not the direction that I want to go fully. I want it to have a young, fresh feel, but still have that very traditional and to feel and honor that brownstone architecture and look. So that's kind of the niche that I'm actively working on moving towards. But let's see, Anne Brown, where do you find design inspirations and keep those creative juices flowing? That's a great question. And for any of you who have insight on these questions or want to share your niche, you can add them in the chat box. Just saw your comment, Birney. And let us know too, right? I'm merely one of many experts in this group right now, so please do share. So where do I find design inspirations and keep those creative? I find inspiration in nature. I find it in artwork. I find it in rest. One of the things that I have found consistently that helps me when I'm working on a project and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it and I'm trying different things and it's just not working and I don't feel good, my gut doesn't feel good about it. Every single time I save and step away and I sleep on it, without fail, the next day, I wake up with clarity on the direction that I want to take. I don't know, that might not work for everybody, but anytime your creativity starts to feel forced, for me, I immediately take that as a cue that I need to step away, because forced creativity always feels forced, right? It always looks forced. It's just like something about the way the eye settles on things doesn't sit quite right. So stepping away, allowing your brain to just mull over it in the background, maybe get out of the house and gain some inspiration. If you live in a really beautiful place and can go see things, definitely do that. One of our designers who works for the company, and you guys probably see him a lot on Instagram, is Bernardo. He lives down in Miami and he's everywhere all of the time. He is out seeing beautiful spaces, interiors, architecture, traveling constantly. And that's what really keeps him inspired. So anytime you can get out, grab a friend, go to a showroom for a day, you know, in a city, if you can find one nearby, and just let your brain appreciate beauty without trying to solve a problem. That's when it's going to come to you naturally. That would be my recommendation. That was very long-winded, sorry. Alrighty. Any other questions? Or if you guys just have insight to share, I meant to say this in the beginning, do you guys have any design mistakes or business-related mistakes that you've made that, you know, I didn't go over here, that you would like to share with the group so that they don't make the same mistake? Please share that in the comments, in the chat. And also hello to everybody who joined while I was talking. Welcome. Hey, Tiana, recognize some of these names. Latoya was in the starter kit group. She was on that video. Welcome, guys. Hey. Alrighty. Well, so that is all of the questions. I don't want to keep you guys long on your Friday, some of you Friday evening. But this conversation does not need to end here. Head to the community. I'll link this again. So Suzanne, this starter kit is a networking group. It's what did we say yesterday, Latoya? An accountability group, I think, is the thing that I feel the most comfortable calling it. So it is a group that's going to meet twice monthly, kind of beginning. And yeah, definitely. Let me put my email. And what we're going to do, if you head to the community here, let me show you. And go to learn. So you'll create an account. We have a number of mentors who do online courses. These are our webinars, right? And our level up event. Tons of great information. At the top here, we have our growth kit, but then we have our startup kit. So this is where the starter kit group is going to be working through 1, 2, 3 videos to start. We're going to be completing all of the worksheets that go along with these videos and bringing it back to the group at the end of the month, or, you know, in about 30 days, and getting feedback from our peers. And then we're going to take on the next 3 courses, which is marketing, pricing and services, and then the art of the client presentation. And we're going to be completing those worksheets and assignments, coming back to the group, and again, getting that feedback and getting, so to really, for people who are at that beginning stage of their business, where they don't have that clearly defined niche, they don't know who their ideal client is, maybe they've tried creating design services like me and it just was a total bust, and now I'm starting from scratch again. These courses are fantastic at just getting that foundation so solid, so that then we can move on to the growth kit, which is what I'd like these groups to eventually turn into, and to continue to support each other, learn from each other, and really start to flourish and grow. And the accountability part comes with the fact that if you have to show up in 30 days and present to your peers, you're a lot more likely to stick to it and get it done. I know me, sometimes I feel so overwhelmed by the amount of work that I feel like I have to do that I just don't get started, right? So these groups are as much for me as they are for everybody else in the group. Still learning after 40 years? Absolutely. And we'll never stop learning. So yeah, shoot me an email. If enough people are interested, I will start a new group entirely, and we can try and plan to meet for as early as next week. Or what I can do is send you the Zoom recording for yesterday's meeting, and then you can join us in the group chat that's on the community and join us at our next meeting. And so you haven't lost, any time. Okay, so we'll figure out which works best depending on the interest that comes in. Alrighty. Okay. So my email address is right above in the comments there. It says rachel@foyer.com. I'm not sure if you can see that, Suzanne. Thanks. Yeah, just shoot me an email. No problem. All righty, guys. Oh, something in the Q&A. Sarah from Z Design Studio says, do we need to pay to be a part of these groups? You do not. No. So you do need to create an account on the Foyer community, which you guys can see here. You'll create your profile, which this is just Foyer's, but a little about me. You can add all of your work. It doesn't have to be Foyer renders. It can be photography. It can be renders from another software. It's totally fine. This is meant to showcase your work, and so that that the other designers in the community can kind of check you out and see what your design aesthetic is and connect with you. You can add your social accounts, your website if you already have one. And then on the main wall, this is where we can ask questions. We just had Sandra join. She's from France. And it's such a great place. Like the other day, somebody asked, like, what do you guys do for like your background music or your background noise? We got so many great comments of like podcasts to listen to, like design podcasts or music playlists and all sorts of stuff. So it's really just a community to connect with other designers, learn from them, post your renders, get feedback, ask a question that's specific to like business or design or the software even I'm on every day. I can help answer your questions. You'll get access to all of these courses, and we have a job board. So these are entirely free. And then if you go down here to jobs, we have kind of some one-off job opportunities to get you a bit more versed in the software. But some of these are listed by Foyer, others are listed by designers who need help. So it's a great way of getting your foot in the door and establishing some rapport if you are new and are maybe looking to work under a kind of a more established designer and learn from them. So check this out as well. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. No problem, Virani. Thanks for stopping by again. Alrighty, guys. I am going to sign off here. You have my email. If you have any additional questions, please connect with me. If you want to join the starter kit group, reach out. And I will see you all next week. All right. Have a great weekend. Bye.